Welcome everyone to Wake County Beekeepers Association's very first virtual meeting, April 2020. Unfortunately, we're not able to all meet together tonight. Turn it over to our guest speaker for the evening, James Wilkes. And James, if you don't mind, just tooting your own horn and giving a little bit of your bio.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to speak, and in this interesting time we find ourselves with being able to do this by Zoom. Actually, back in the good old days when we first started with Hive Tracks, we would Skype into meetings, and it was way more challenging than it is these days with Zoom, and everybody, couldn't all be in together. So the technology has come a long way since then. And so, yeah, I'll give a little bit of my background as we go, but my title, Bee Data as Drawn Comb, was just kind of a last minute thought that, what is valuable to us as beekeepers, and drawn comb is one of those things that if you've been keeping bees any length of time, for new beekeepers, you might not know the depth of this yet, but how valuable drawn comb is to you and your beekeeping, and to the bees themselves, and how much energy it saves, how much time it saves. Any of those kind of aspects of drawn comb, I think, is what I want to try to convey tonight as to the value of bee data. And what I want to do is take you through kind of what I mean by bee data, and then kind of what are the different ways that we collect bee data, who collects that, what does it mean to us as beekeepers, what does it mean to us as organizations, what does it mean to us as a community of beekeepers. So this title slide here shows myself there as a child in 1975. This was in my backyard in Eden, North Carolina, which is where I grew up in Rockingham County, and so just a little bit west of Wake County and north. And that's my father in our backyard. And so we had bees growing up. He got his first package from Sears and Roebuck. So I've been around bees my whole life. The other picture is my son and the bees. There's a lot going on in that picture. There's some tags on the hives. There's a hive scale. And the point is that there's beekeeping is very different today than it was in 1975. And even within the last 10 to 15 years, it's changed quite a bit. And the technology has changed as well. So we're going to kind of see what impact it has. And while I'm got this slide up, and you can look at which points you want, there's some folks that are joining us as well from my Hive Tracks team. Laura Dye is on, and Ethan Walton. If you've interacted with us at all on the support side, Ethan is the one that you've probably communicated with. And then my son may be on here. I don't know if he's on there, but the one that was in that first picture, Sullivan Wilkes, and he's taken over our operation now. You can see about in the middle of there, I started keeping bees in 2000. We moved to a farm in 2005. That's Faith Mountain Farm, and we're kind of a diverse family farm. We've tried lots of different things, let's say, as a farm, and bees are one of those components. And we expanded in 2010 to more than, or 2011 to 100 plus colonies. He's running the bees now, and we're at probably 160 or so with 200 nukes growing out. So he's really escalated that and doing that. So I've been, my day job is a computer science professor at App State, and I combined my computer science background and the beekeeping that I was doing and merged them together in various ways, both on the academic side with Bee Informed Partnership. I've been engaged with that since the beginning. In fact, I just thought of this today. Dr. David Tarpey and myself I was taking a queen rearing workshop from him in the early days of the queen workshops that they run. I was taking it, I'm pretty sure, at the Forsyth County Beekeepers location. It was 10 years ago, within a week or two of right now, that I was taking that workshop, and I had the prototype for Hive Tracks out, and we had a discussion about, is there funding on the academic side that might, fund this kind of work? And the Bee Informed Partnership idea was actually born out of that conversation. So there was a lot of things going on in 2010. But so for the past 10 or plus years, I've been fully immersed in both the technology and beekeeping side. And so we all want to make good apiary management decisions, is what I would, the way I phrase that. And, how do you do that? How do we make good choices? How do we make good decisions? And, some of that is, just a second, I'm trying to get this little thing to move. Oh, well. So how do we make good decisions? Well, we take classes. You're talking about all the classes that were canceled, things like that. That's a big issue for people. That we take classes, we learn, and thankfully a lot of those things have gone online now as well. Some of that's been put out there for free by folks, which is great. And then there's experience. So just get in there and keep the bees and get your hands dirty with them and follow along with somebody. Those are two certain requirements. But there are all these other red colored bullets that I have: operational data, observational data, secondary data sources, hive monitor data. You notice a theme: data is in all of those. And each of those different kinds of data, I would argue, are critical to your success as a beekeeper and your bees' success in terms of health and productivity. And those are all highlighted in red because I believe technology certainly plays a significant role and can play a pivotal role in those different kinds of data. And we all know we live in kind of this day and age of data, for good and ill as well, and we can talk about that as we go. By the way, if you have questions, feel free to post them over there in the chat, and we'll get those as we go. And I definitely want to have a long Q&A at the end of this, and we'll get to your questions there as well. So jump in if you have questions. So let's just ask yourself a question. What kind of, this is kind of funny because we're all on a device of some sort right now, right? And we're using technology, we're using the connectivity. And this particular slide has way more relevance today than at any other time that I've given this talk in history, I would suggest, because we've all been forced onto these platforms. And so we're used to, or getting used to, or adjusting to, depends on how much you used it before, the idea of technology playing a role in our lives. And it should definitely play a role in our beekeeping lives as well, is what I would argue, and hopefully can motivate you to take a first step, if you will, and in using technology in your beekeeping to get some of these data points that I think you'll see will make you a better beekeeper. And that last point down there, you are accidentally, it's not really accidentally, I have it in quotes, collecting data all the time. And we really live in, some call a surveillance society. And there's definitely some current concerns with that from a privacy standpoint. And that doesn't go away with beekeeping either. And we can talk about that as well. And it's something that I'm very sensitive to and want to create systems that are privacy preserving and secure as well. So let's look at these first two categories, observational data and operational data. And they're just like their names imply, observational data, what do we see, okay? We talk a lot about IoT and sensors and that sort of thing. Well, we're like one big sensor ourselves as humans. We have eyes, we have ears, we can smell, and these are all, when we're in the beehive, all of those things are engaged, right? We're sensing, we're collecting that, and we're storing that data. So we are the best sensor that we have in that regard. And so observational data is those things that we see, the things that we smell, the things we hear, what is going on when we're in the hive. So the beekeepers collect this kind of data. Governments also, or third parties that want to either monitor or support beekeeping, their surveys, registers. In North Carolina, we're not required to register. Other states you are. And one shout out right here for the Bee Informed Partnership, that bullet right there. Right now, this year's version of the annual management and loss survey is going on. And if you have not filled yours out, then by all means, go fill out your Bee Informed Partnership survey. It has become the go-to data source in the U.S. For loss and management data. You'll see it quoted in every article that talks about bee losses. The numbers from the Bee Informed Partnership are what is used in those. And so it usually takes about a week or two to get those numbers all together and processed. So look for, say, second week of May, the numbers that will come out for this past season or this past winter. And then others that collect this data, Hive Tracks and other kinds of tools like Hive Tracks, and then other, you as an individual, you keep up with information about your beekeeping. You might have a notebook, you might have write on the hive, you might have a spreadsheet, you might take audio notes. There are many different ways that you as individuals can do that. Your club has information that you keep. And then there's researchers, then the product providers, all these people. This observational and operational data is of importance to each of those groups. I will call them stakeholders for different reasons. And then guess what? The social media, Facebook and other things, those collect data on you if you weren't aware of that. It's true. And there's a lot of actually very interesting and good information that you as a beekeeper can collect. If you follow the Wake County Beekeepers Facebook page, for example, you're going to get the temperature, kind of what's going on in the beekeeping space right now. When are the hives starting to swarm? Are people putting supers on? Is the honey flowing? All these kinds of questions are really valuable data points that you as a beekeeper ought to use to help your beekeeping. So what is the value of this kind of data? Well, again, Bee Informed Partnership and Hive Tracks are two that I've been engaged with for the past 10 years, and I'm pretty invested in those, so I know that a lot of the details in the background of those. So again, any questions that you have about either of those, I'm happy to answer. And again, the data that comes to the Bee Informed Partnership survey, they are doing analysis to connect, find correlations between management actions and outcomes. And so there's a huge data explorer page that you can go to at Bee Informed and look at the data. What does it say about treating for varroa or not treating for varroa, or winterizing your hives, or queen age, or treatments? What about this treatment versus that treatment? What's the efficacy or the loss that's happening out there with these treatments? So a lot of very interesting data if you want to dig into it out there. Then other things that Bee Informed is doing is the sentinel apiaries, and I'll have some slides on that in a moment as well. If anybody out there is doing sentinel apiaries, then kudos to you. If you haven't done that, then you ought to consider it. I've been using that since it started, and it's really interesting data. It's both Varroa counts and nosema levels in your hives. It's on a regular schedule, forces you to keep a good cadence of doing that monitoring. And then on the commercial side, they have these things called tech teams. They also have what's called a hive scale portal where multiple scale vendor data is going. And then Mite Check, I hope you've heard about Mite Check as well. Lewis Cauble has done a great job kind of promoting mite monitoring in particular and the Mite Check program. And so those are all really important pieces of data that Be Informed is working on. So this is back to that original picture that I had. Isn't that a pretty picture? So nice. And you can see there's a hive scale there, and a shout out to Solution Bee. I saw Raphael was on here, or he's on Facebook, or he was. I don't know, one of the two places. But that's his hive scale right there. And there's a lot going on in this picture. There's a little scoop and a little bottle there for collecting bees for a Varroa sample. The hives are tagged. This is for the Sentinel Apiary program. We're collecting scale data. There's also this is what samples look like as part of the Sentinel Apiary program. And these are all in salt water. They're 300 bees, about a half a cup of bees going to the lab at University of Maryland. They put them in the shakers and they give you a very accurate count of your Varroa load. You even get how many bees were in your sample, how many drones, they have weights of them, lots of fascinating details that they collect there. And this is the kind of information that's collected for the Sentinel Apiary program. And you notice this is a paper sheet, right? So just because I'm talking about technology, it doesn't mean that we're going to throw out all the other ways of keeping information. And I certainly don't advocate for getting rid of things that work. And I'm very pragmatic in that regard. And so using whatever tools you have at whatever level of comfort you are, collect data in whatever way that you have accessible to you. And I still use all methods. I wrote down on the back of on a super today. I use Sharpies on supers. I take images. I use our tools. So again, all of these methods keep records, however you're going to do it. But some interesting things here. There's queen status, queen seen, queen right, queen not seen, virgin queen, drone layer, queen layer, laying worker. So there's all, decide which kind of queen you have. And what's the queen status of this hive? What's your brood pattern? They have some pictures that show you how to rate the brood. What's your configuration? What's your number of frames of bees? Okay, that's one that has become a pretty good measure just of growth of your hive population, things like that. It's one that is fairly easy to monitor, and I would highly recommend you start doing that just on a routine basis. Just start getting yourself in a pattern of counting frames of bees. So again, the point here is these are the kinds of data that are being collected. This is for the Sentinel Apiary program, so it's a little more detailed. And this is a kind of report that you might get out of Sentinel Apiary. And you could get this as well just from your own monitoring for Varroa. And this shows the typical way that Varroa grows throughout the season. So here you see in the dark green, this is the hives that were part of this Sentinel Apiary. And then they started getting out of control here in August, which is kind of when we would expect. And then in September, they went through the roof. And in this particular example, I should have treated here, and I didn't. And you can see they got out of control. I was able to recover here, but what you don't see on this graph is the long-term outcomes. Which of those hives were already kind of toast at that point and didn't make it through the winter. Those are the longitudinal type points of interest that we sometimes don't see. All right, and here's just a look at the Mite Check graph. If you haven't been to there, go to mitecheck.org or com. I can't remember which one it is. And it shows, looks like Raleigh's really red on that one. This was a while back. All right, so that's from the Bee Informed Partnership side. From Hive Tracks side, you know, I think many of you are familiar with Hive Tracks, and it's just an apiary management software tool. It's a platform where you can keep records online. And this is just, again, keeping this operational observational data about your bees. Where are your bees? How many hives do you have at a location? When was the last time you touched them? What did you do to them? When did you feed them? When did you add supers? When did you treat? All of these aspects of your beekeeping, having a place to record that so that you can know what you did last time, what you need to do this time. Those are the kinds of things that we record or give you the opportunity to record in Hive Tracks. And there's immediate value. Just if you take a beekeeping class, they're going to talk about record keeping. They're going to talk about the value of you knowing what's going on with your bees, keeping records, and that's Hive Tracks provides that value to you. Other tools as well provide that, but there's an aggregate value here, and this is where I think we get a big multiplier effect and bring value to our community, bring value to the researchers, and that's really what we're after here, and where we believe the big value is for everybody is in this aggregation of the data, and we'll talk more about that as we go. But the other thing it does is it creates a natural group of what you might call citizen scientists, and it could also, I noticed you talked about mentoring when you were starting. Hive Tracks would give away, again, or any other record keeping tool, if you kept it in a Google sheet, say, and shared the data with your mentor, then they could kind of look over your shoulder and see what's going on with your bees. Again, in this day of not being able to get together, what better way to share information with one another, right? That's how we've kind of become accustomed to. And so again, that's what Hive Tracks brings to the table in that regard. This just shows some of the coverage that we have in terms of users across the U.S. You can see we're pretty user-centric, North Carolina-centric in particular. But this also reflects kind of the density of beekeepers across the U.S. There's a lot more hobbyist beekeepers on the East Coast than there are out west. So I wanted to focus on just a couple of data examples within Hive Tracks that I think are particularly interesting and that we believe will bring a lot of value to beekeepers. One is this thing called Healthy Colony Checklist, and it's getting a little bit of traction out there. Dick Rogers created this, and it's a way to assess a hive. It's just 6 yes/no questions. And in the process of answering those yes/no questions, you decide, is my colony healthy? And if any of the answers to the questions are no, then you need to say, okay, well, what do I need to do about that particular aspect of my hive? And so it's a quick way of deciding, is my hive okay? And if not, what do I need to do? And when we have, how many people are on this call? Like 80 some people on this call. If you all went out and evaluated your hive in your yard, what would you say? What would you use as a measure? How would you evaluate the health of that hive? Is it healthy or not? So if we each use the same criteria, then we could compare. We could look at each other and say, hey, this groups are good, these are bad, and just give a rough measure of what's good and bad. Mite monitoring, mite check, that one is obvious. That's one that's really been, again, in North Carolina in particular, Lewis has done a great job of emphasizing the importance of monitoring your mites and keeping up with your loads. And that's going to be one of the first questions people ask these days when something's going wrong with your hive. What's your mite level? That people ask that almost all the time. So you need to know the answer to that. And recording that is something that we've provided as well within Hive Tracks. And then finally, the community example that I mentioned before of a way for you to share data with one another, get the value of what we're even doing right now. I mean, that's why you have bee clubs, the community of beekeepers. You share experiences, you share information with one another. When you come to bee meetings, the first question is, well, how are your bees? What's going on? What are you doing, right? And so having an online place to do that with data actually to back it up, so it's not just somebody, they can't just say stuff without having data to back it up, which helps true up some of people's claims perhaps.
James, we got a question.
Yes.
Cecil Willems said the coverage across the U.S. is very impressive. And the question is there any research entities utilizing this amazing data set historically?
The answer is yes, sort of. So yes, the coverage is great in terms of how many users and where they're, by the way, each of those numbers was an apiary number. That was how many apiaries there were. It wasn't users, it was apiaries. Wow. Didn't make that point. But we started digging into the data itself about 2.5, 3 years ago. Actually, it was part of a Healthy Hives 2020 grant.
Got my word wrong.
Got us to, gave us some funds to really dig into the data and start looking at what we had. And what we learned was that there, while we have good coverage, the consistency and the reliability of that data, of people using the tool and using it well, there were some gaps in it. And so that's given us really good information to kind of look at the tool, what's the important piece of the data that we need to collect. And that's really what we've been doing actually for the last 2 years. And we may have seemed a little quiet to folks out there, but we've been really digging into the data and seeing what do we have and what we need to do to make that better. So the answer to that question is yes, and we can't wait for it to get even better because of the amazing things that we know we can do when we get that data. So great question, I appreciate that.
So another one, James.
Yes.
Nick Beckloff, what's the schedule / system for feature request and software updates to Hive Tracks?
I think that's more than one question. But for feature requests, you can support at hivetracks.com, or if you want to go straight to Ethan, just say Ethan at hivetracks.com. And so we constantly take feature requests, and we have a backlog of feature requests. Some of those are easier to do than others, and we're continually in as far as a technology timeline, a roadmap. We are definitely doing that right now and evaluating what are our next steps with the software. And we have some really interesting plans in place for that we hope to roll out pretty soon. But the bottom line is that this year you can expect a lot of updates and new looks for Hive Tracks itself as a software platform.
Okay, one last question, then we'll let you continue. Kim Rossi asked, is the form available to all of us to use? Specific.
This, Healthy Colony Checklist is, if that's what she's asking, absolutely. Just do a Google search. It's out there. Dick has posted it. I think Bear has it on their site. And this is what it looks like inside of Hive Tracks. But it's the same 6 kind of categories. And you can see I put the bold words there: brood, adults, queen, nutrition, mites, and space. Those are the categories. And you can pretty much fit everything that you're looking for in the hive under those categories. And the objective here again is, if everything's okay, you don't need to do anything, right? I mean, that's when you, and let's back out just a second. When you go visit your hives, you should have a reason for being there and a reason for why you're opening up your hives. What are you looking for? Why am I, what's my purpose in being here at the yard? Your purpose may be, I just love my bees and I just need a bee fix, right? Just to go and enjoy the bees. That's okay. But at certain other times, there are, you have a particular reason. Like right now, you all, I'm pretty sure, are in a good flow right now. And so you should be monitoring nectar flow, honey supers. Do you have enough supers? Things like that. And so when you go in the bees, you have a reason to be in there. And if everything looks okay, then guess what? You don't have to do anything, right? But if something is not, doesn't look right, or is not, one of these categories is off, then it may require monitoring. It may require a follow-up visit. It may require something right now, right? But those are you want to help guide that decision-making process. That's the whole point of this. And this is just a nice little graph showing over time what you're going to see as you do this monitoring, like with a healthy colony checklist over time. You'll just get a general temperature, kind of what your hive's doing. Similarly, this is what your graph might look like for mite monitoring, and this is, again, a typical look at what mites might do during a season. Sometimes you'll get a rise here in the early part of the season. Maybe you're doing some splits and things that knock that back, or you do some sort of treatment, and then you get a rise again towards the end of the season, and you need to do something about it then as well. But again, this is just a visual to show you what's going on with bees. This is just a screenshot from one of these citizen science groups that we created, and this shows, when inspections were added by everybody in this group, when were treatments applied. You can see they kind of match what we would think would make sense for beekeepers. Your treatments are going on here in August and September. You have way more inspections typically in the early part of the season, and then you kind of tail off. And this page right here, this is one, again, that we can do for a club as well. So you could have a club, kind of Hive Tracks page, and share the information among the club members. And we're working on kind of how to frame that up for clubs and to best have clubs participate in that. But this community feature, can be used in a lot of different ways. And again, one is with clubs. Another is if you just have some beekeeping buddies and you want to create your own community group within Hive Tracks, then you can do that. You have the option to do that, kind of like Facebook group or something. So let me transition a little bit here to some of the other kinds of data. So what do we see when we're looking at the bees? What kind of operation are we doing? Are we trying to make honey? Are we growing bees? Are we just doing it as a hobby? That's the operational kind of parameters that we work within. Are we trying to not use hard chemicals? All those kinds of questions. Do we want to feed or not feed? But there's other data, and this is what I would call hive monitor data. And I want to illustrate, again, it's probably not too hard to conceive of, but what's the value of hive monitor data to us? And some of the providers that are out there, Arnia, although we're not sure they're still alive, I think they are, and Solution Bee, Broodminder, and there's multiple others out there. And if you go to different continents, New Zealand has their own group of them. The East Europeans, they're really keen on this concept, and so there's a lot of product out there from them. But weight data in particular is one that's pretty easy to understand. Just from us as beekeepers, we kept up with weight of our hives historically. We just haven't had the accuracy that we can get with a hive scale. And some of that information from a hive scale is more of just, wow, that's really cool. I didn't know the bees did that. Like when they dry out the honey at night, and your weight trickles down overnight. That's just fascinating the way they do that. When they leave in the morning, there's a big dip. When the field force is leaving out, it's noticeable on the scale. But in the more granular scale, you can know, what's the flow look like? When is there a dearth? How are winter stores going? So those are all super important pieces of information to us as beekeepers. Another piece that doesn't matter as much to us as or the hobbyist beekeepers, but that's remote monitoring. When do you go to the yard? If they're in your backyard, then it's pretty easy. You don't need the remote monitoring, but if I can go real time through my phone and see my scale data, then that's certainly worth a lot there. And then obviously there's, just like with the other data, there's a lot of promise of having some new insights that we didn't even think about or couldn't ask the questions for until we had this scale data. And so we're people are digging into that and looking into that and seeing what do these weights mean, and can we get new information from that. Here's a couple of screenshots. This one I think was, this is an Arnia scale. This was just a spring flow. So this was 6 days, 50 pounds over 6 days. So that's about two shallow supers worth right there, which is pretty darn good. And you can just see kind of how this goes day after day. Anybody recognize this flower? If you said sourwood, you were correct. And so as a side note, our operation, my family farm operation, my son's operation now, Sullivan, part of our business model is making sourwood honey. And so we're very keen on sourwood, when it blooms, what's the flow like. And so some of these slides are from that. This is when we're moving bees to sourwood, these are moving from our farm. We actually move from higher elevation to lower elevations to get to a better sourwood spot. This is him deploying the hives in a sourwood yard. So he's just unloaded them and supering them up. And this was actually from a few years ago. It was a pretty phenomenal hive. You don't always choose the right hive to put a scale under, right? But in this case, it was a very good one. So this one went from 75 kilograms to 140 kilograms, which is about 143 pounds. And if you want to know when sourwood flows, look at that graph, right? I mean, when it starts going up over there, June 24 or so, and we harvested July 17, 18, somewhere in there. So for where we're placing these hives, that was our flow period. That's just the kind of macro level information you can get. And there's a smiling person with a truckload full of sourwood honey. Beautiful, isn't it? All right, so let's move on to secondary data. How are we doing on time? I can't see a clock anywhere on any of my devices. How are we, Kim?
We're at 8:29, so you have time to go.
Okay, good. We're good then. Okay, so we looked at observational data, operational data, hive monitor data. And by the way, I focused on weight, but any other kind of monitor data is important, especially temperature. That one is really interesting, brood nest temperature in particular. And any kind of sensor you can put in there, people are gathering that data and trying to understand it. And that's from sound, like I said, temperature, humidity, weight, video at the entrance. You'll see all of those kinds of devices out there, and people really doing interesting things with that data. So the next and last category of data is secondary data. And by secondary data, I mean things that are not, you don't directly collect as a beekeeper, but that is out there and is important to you as a beekeeper. It's actually, I would suggest this is some of the most important information to you as a beekeeper. Remind yourself of what's happening with your beehive. Okay, so a beehive is located at a particular GPS location, and the life of that hive is totally dependent on what's within the 2 to 3 mile radius of that hive, along with whatever you put into it or what you take out of it. So if you kind of think about it in that regard, this system, this ecosystem that you have with your beehive, what's around your hive is critical to its life and its health. And so what do we need to know about what's going on around your hive? Well, we need to know what forage is there. What are the bees being exposed to? What's the weather? Okay, those are the kinds of secondary data that are important, again, not just important, but are critical and define the success of your beehive. And so where can you get that information? Well, most of that's pretty easy to find. Google Maps are great. I mean, the satellite images, y'all can come in. The satellite images are very good, and they're easy to see. This one is one from within Hive Tracks, and this little stack of boxes just shows where your yard is located, and then you can see just from this, you can probably guess that these green areas are going to be agriculture, and this is housing development, that sort of thing. There's some forests right there. So this is a great mix, right? Kind of in North Carolina, we have a lot of this mixed use, and that includes agriculture and trees and urban landscape. So this is not atypical for us in North Carolina. So this is what that looks like on the ground, sometimes in spring, and this is in Iredell County. This is near Statesville, and this is if you're a beekeeper and been keeping bees very long, this is just a fantastic picture. These bees are going to be super happy and grow and thrive, and this is just a great place for bees in the spring. The plant in the background, if you don't recognize it, is canola or rapeseed, and it has just copious amounts of nectar, and the pollen from it is also fairly nutritious as well. So knowing that these fields are sometimes in canola around this yard makes this yard a very good place for us to grow bees in the spring, which is what we do at this location. So that's important for us to know, right? In regards to this yard and this location and what we can expect from the bees. And we can do things with the bees in this condition that we couldn't do in other places because we have this extra flow that's going on. In this case, you can split these bees to death, and they'll still make honey. It's pretty crazy. You can almost not keep them from making honey in this environment. This is another satellite image, and this is in our top secret sourwood locations. Of course, they're not top secret now because you just recorded this. But the little rings around this are showing 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile radius rings around these. Again, these little stack of boxes are the bee yards. And the dark here, this is forest. And sourwood is a tree, and it blooms best. You can get the best sourwood when you don't have any other things mixing in like clover or other agriculture. And this is actually the Blue Ridge Parkway right here. This is down in Millers Creek, Wilkesboro area. So this is kind of the escarpment where it drops off. And this is just fantastic sourwood country. And this satellite image shows that. It shows that where these bees are going to forage is within these trees. They're not getting very far outside of that at all. And so if they're going to make nectar here at this time, it's going to be from the trees that are blooming. And guess what? Sourwood's the only game in town. And Jeremy, I know, is out there, Jeremy Hayes, and he posted about his bees being lighter. He tried to make sourwood, and his bees were lighter coming out than they were going in. And I've had that experience myself. It's not very fun. But if you're going to get sourwood, then you want it when that's the only thing that's going to bloom. If you're doing other things, if you're raising queens, if you don't recognize this is there's a bunch of queen cells here. And so my son Sullivan grafts his own queens for part of our queens. And so this was, I don't remember if this was last year or year before, but it happened twice. We will graft off the mountain, we call it. So we're up at elevation in Ashe County, but we graft down low, and sometimes we bring the cell builders back to our house, and we did that in this case. And a few days later, this was the temperature, 18 degrees, and there's a cell builder out in the yard. That could be disaster, right? Or it could be okay. But it was important for us to know this is where weather, the weather that's going around your bees is important to know what the weather is and what effect it's going to have. Well, thankfully, they were okay and made it through it.
So James, two questions real quick.
Yeah.
What elevation do you like for sourwood?
That's a secret question. No, I think it's pretty, from what I have read and understand and experience, it's kind of a band between, I want to say 1,500 and 2,000 feet, somewhere in there is the better range for sourwood.
Okay, the second one is, do you also record weather in relationship to hive activity?
Uh, does who record that?
Do you,
I mean, so your weather is directly correlated to your hive activity. I mean, that's a no-brainer, right? I mean, it's going to change based on the temperature and whether it's raining or not. And actually, that a good point with that is, say for sourwood production in particular, in our biggest issue in sourwood is if we have continual thunderstorms, right? If we have these systems, if we get caught in this pattern of afternoon thunderstorms every day, and it just kind of totally messes up the sourwood flow, and so and even on those high scales, you can see if it rains, the bees come back home, and then sun comes out, they go back out, and you can see these fluctuations on the high scale. So so the answer is hive activity definitely correlates directly to weather. In fact, you can almost use weather as a proxy, right, for your hive activity.
is that part of your record keeping, weather?
But weather is part of, yeah, weather is recorded.
Okay.
Yes. And the although with weather, and we're kind of playing around with this, how much weather do we actually have to record? Because it's all, those data sets are out there. And so if we're going to do data analysis, downstream, then we really can just go to these other databases and get weather from there if we're doing analysis. But certainly you want to know what the weather is, in your yard. So now the long-term dream here is or vision, if you will, is an intelligent hive management system, or as one of my colleagues, Joseph Kazier, has termed it, the genius hive. And he's written some articles in Bee Culture about that. But it's really just how do we combine all of these things together, kind of in this futuristic way of software, hardware, and with data analytics, really to give the beekeeper additional information, again, to make good decisions. So the goal is really to augment your beekeeping with these tools that either increase your enjoyment, or if you're a commercial beekeeper, increase your production, reduce your costs, and make you more successful as a business. But this is a typical data analytics diagram, and we're really at that bottom level, the descriptive analytics. Somebody asked, is anybody evaluating this data? Where we're evaluating this bottom layer, we're at this descriptive, and we're doing a little bit of diagnostics. Bee-Informed Partnership is, and we are as well, to make some correlations. But as these data sets mature, as we get more robust data sets and layer these data sets together, then we can get into those very interesting other layers of the pyramid. So I'm getting close to the end, but I want to just kind of state some of the challenges that we have, and what are some of the next steps that are going on. One, any technology that we bring into the bee yard needs to be easy to use, needs to be useful, needs to be affordable. And what technology should we take? Is it okay to take our phone into the yard? Should we take our phone into the yard? Or what other kind of tools would be most useful there? And then what to collect and what does it mean? Again, those are questions that we're asking. Those are questions that we're coming up with answers. One piece of this is data standardization, which we've spent a good chunk of time doing. Again, Joseph Kazier from our team has spearheaded what we call a data standardization group with Apimondia, the International Beekeeping Group, and so he's the chair of that committee, and they're exploring, how do we standardize bee data so that data that I'm collecting and that you're collecting and that our friends in New Zealand and Canada and Australia and Italy are collecting, and in Tanzania and in Turkey, how can all these data sets, be comparable, and come up with, us speaking the same language, if you will, in terms of bee data. And then this is something obviously I've been working on for 10 plus years, is getting buy-in from beekeepers, from beekeeping organizations, and government agencies, and those that the stakeholders of bee data, those groups. We believe and contend that bee data can help all of these organizations do their jobs better and more effectively. This past year, we've had great inroads with the Food and Agriculture Office at the UN, and have made good connections there in terms of how can bee data and more generally pollinator data play a role in the mission that FAO has, and satisfying sustainable development goals of the UN, things like that. So we put a lot of energy in that direction as well. And then lastly, there's a lot of moving parts here. There's a lot of pieces of this puzzle that we're, if you kind of step back and you take a look at the ecosystem and kind of what all the pieces, who are all the players, what needs to be coordinated or organized is quite a daunting task, but it's one that we're totally into and are committed to, and will continue to work hard in that space. So what can you do? Well, you can participate. You can promote data collection and the importance of data in whatever way that means to you. But don't ever forget to enjoy your bees as well. And so I think I'm kind of at the end. And so we can go to Q&A now. By the way, this image, right? You would think that's some fancy camera taking that image. That's just a phone camera. And I say just a phone camera. The phone cameras these days are just amazing. And you have a super powerful tool in your hand with your camera. And despite the messiness of the bee yard, I would not be in my bee yard now without my phone and taking pictures. It is just fantastic, the images that you can get and the information that it captures from your phone camera. So.
Okay, James, we've got a question. Are there plans to support, or does it support already, to have Hive Tracks handle secondary data such as scale readings and sound monitors?
Yes, so that would be in the category of integrating Hive Tracks with these other tools. And that is something that we have watched and monitored and have relationships with all of these other groups that are out there that are doing hive monitoring. And the answer is yes, eventually that will happen. When is the question? And part of that has to do with many of us that are in this technology space are small businesses, and trying to figure out how to make a sustainable business model work. And to integrate with anybody is a cost, and so we all have a desire to do that, and so I think it's just as this space matures, you're going to see more of that integration happening. And it's not clear to me where that's going to happen, if it's all going to be like within Hive Tracks or there's going to be some other third party that aggregate. Not sure.
So that's all the questions that are in the chat right now.
All right, folks, give us some more questions, or I'm going to start talking again.
Okay, here's a question. Will there be, or is there, a light version of Hive Tracks?
Hey, who asked that question? Yes, we actually have an internal product called Hive Tracks Lite. That is its name, and as its name implies, it's a rebirth of the Hive Tracks platform. And given everything that we've learned, in the last 10 years, and with our experience and what data is important and that sort of thing, so yes, there is something called Hive Tracks Lite that we don't know if that will be its name when it comes out, but something that's as I said, a reinvention of what we're doing with Hive Tracks.
So another question is, how about a club license?
Talk to us. Absolutely, we would be happy to talk about something along those lines.
So what new features can we expect this year?
New features. Have you used the old features yet? Just kidding. So I think there are enough features as we have it, that you can find what you need. Again, if there's something that we don't have that you want, then certainly tell us. I think not to be a smart aleck, but what I think you will find in our, the things we're going to do is that we're going to make it easier to use, and the useful parts more prominent, more in your face, so that you can you'll be able to realize the value from it. And I mean, there are things there like this page I have right here. This is the mite count, so you can record mite counts within Hive Tracks, and it actually pushes them over to Mite Check as well, so they appear on the map. And actually about 10% of the mite counts that are on Mite Check come from Hive Tracks users, so that's pretty cool. And the other thing that you can expect is on the mobile friendly side of Hive Tracks. Right now, we kind of have some tech debt with is the technical term for that, with the Android app, that it's not aged gracefully, and so there's going to be a redo of that coming out soon. And then, like I said, there's going to be a total redo of kind of everything at some point. Not sure the timeline yet on that.
So we have a suggestion for the name of Hive Tracks Lite, and the suggestion is Hive Tracks Nuke version.
Yeah, we'll take that under consideration. Let me show you, if anybody's got more questions, keep asking. I want to show you something right here. You're still with me, right? On the
Yeah, we have your desktop.
Yeah. So what you're seeing right here, so we have a product out for
Hold on. James,
Yep.
We're only seeing your presentation on your desktop.
Oh, let me.
I think you have to share by app.
Yeah, it's. Okay. And y'all can talk out there if you want. Just. So this is can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a commercial version of Hive Tracks, and this is for, again, our commercial beekeepers. And I just wanted to show you, this was a day in our life today as Faith Mountain Farm, and I was helping my son today with some remote yard visits. And so over here is the map of our yards. These are all the yards within our operation. So this area up here is the Boone area. This is down in Wilkesboro, and this one is down in Statesville, and there's actually another one all the way down here in Kannapolis. So I did a big loop today, all the way down to Kannapolis and back to Statesville and Lenore and back home. But I wanted you to see the kinds of things that we record here. So you can see we have 158 total hives, have 231 nukes. By the way, if you need a nuke, we've got plenty to sell. Uh, and the interesting thing you can see on this is our hive counts over the past since February. And you can see when we started splitting right here in early March. These are our nuke numbers. And so you can see how they just escalate right through here. And so we're growing all those nukes out. The other thing that you see here is this is the data that we collected throughout today. And so each of us, there's Sullivan submitting data, there's me submitting data. And let's look at this one is the nuke yard. So these are images from today. You can see how I use images quite liberally, including screenshots from hive scales and shoot, how do I get back? All these buttons are in my way. So I just wanted to show you kind of what this looks like from our perspective when we're using this tool to guide our work, you know, throughout the day. And we also participate in various experiments that we've talked about, like with Bee Informed Partnership. We're working with sentinel apiaries, and then this one here, we're working with Nectar. If you've heard of Nectar, they're one of these hive device groups, and we have some of their devices. And yeah, you can see this is nice honey frame. They're making honey here. There's some queen cells. Not wanting that right now. But I would just encourage you to take pictures. They are super helpful. This I want to show you. You can see where we write on the hives. So you can see this was participating in the sentinel apiaries for several years. It's got a scale under it. Also, we write with Sharpies on the hive. So there's a number of different things that we do, to keep up with data, and it's not just all electronic. So just want to give you a glimpse into what that looks like. Any other questions while I'm looking at something else?
So there's a question, can we add custom equipment or treatments to Hive Tracks?
So custom equipment, no. There's the way Hive Tracks is currently set up is, it's got this little editor, and you can put each of your pieces of equipment in it and keep up with it, that sort of thing. And so we have a wide range of pieces of equipment, but as you know, beekeepers are quite creative in the kinds of equipment that they make. So we don't have everything that you would want. But you can, there's lots of places to take notes. There's places for when you're treating. We have a long list of different treatments that are available, and there's always an other category that you can use in there. So there's plenty of places to keep up with the information that you need that's custom to you. And that is one of the issues of you can't make it totally customizable. Otherwise, it would not be affordable for anybody. And, well, we couldn't even build it either.
Okay, so the next question is, will more storage for images be available for Hive Tracks users?
I would say yes in whatever the next iteration is. And if you notice on the commercial version that I showed you there, we use a lot more images on the commercial version. And so the answer is yes. Whatever we do moving forward, images will play a role in that. So, yeah.
Okay, another question. When do you harvest your honey? Or what's the criteria for deciding when to harvest?
When it's ready, which, capped honey, of course, is what we're after. And for us, we know when our flows are. And over the years, we know when, when they start, when they end. The scales certainly help with that, but yeah, it's more just, what's capped.
But do you know
As well.
do you know by yard which yards are ready to harvest based on previous history?
Sure. Yeah, and that's another kind of reason that records are important is knowing when those when those typical dates are, right? And that's something as a new beekeeper you don't know, but over time you'll begin to develop that, and talking to other beekeepers or seeing what, especially with scale data, that it really defines when flows happen, when they start, when they end, how they're going. And there's enough collective or publicly available data out there these days that you can usually get a pretty good glimpse of what's going on. But just historical knowledge is extremely important for that. And as many variables as they are, and we're always like, oh wow, it's getting warmer earlier or later or whatever. It very much evens out, I think, in the end. There's variations, and especially the length of a flow. Once it starts, then there's kind of some variables at play that just there's a certain length of time that it can continue to produce. So the last thing I have for you here is an initiative that that Hive Tracks is participating in. It's called the World Bee Count, and so I want you to go out there and look at beescount.org if you haven't. And we're going to be taking pictures of pollinators from around the world, and we're going to have a new app that essentially is it collects images of pollinators from around the world that people submit, and we're going to reveal on this map pollinators from around the world on World Bee Day. And so we want everyone to participate, and beekeepers and non-beekeepers alike. This is an awareness campaign to help people understand how important pollinators are to us as humans. So take a look at that.
So, question: when is Bee Day?
World Bee Day is May 20, 2020.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna, James, I'm gonna jump in here if that's good with you. I just wanted to thank you most wholeheartedly for giving up your evening and providing us the opportunity. The information that you gave us is say hey.
Hi. Oh,
we appreciate your time, and I think one takeaway for everyone, whether you are using Hive Tracks, it's important, and what we learned at the State Beekeepers Spring Conference. It's all about the data, and it's all about your record keeping and having a plan for your pest management. So you just, whether you're using your phone, whether you're using a spiral notebook, you just need to keep up with your hives, your apiary. Most of us, I think, have less than 10, so that's fairly manageable, I think, for the majority of us here in Wake County. I know that there are some club members that have far more than that, but my question, James, to you is, are you going to be hosting the webinar on Thursday?
To be informed?
Yes.
No, that's coming out of Maryland.
Okay.
Yeah. And I did have one other thought to share that I failed to mention. The direction that we're really moving toward, it's a longer term direction, but one that is extremely important to all of us, and that's the area of honey authentication, honey traceability, and that's a global issue. that we all that the big beekeepers have in the U.S. in particular with honey prices. I'm sure you know kind of how all that the problems work there, but it's also a local issue within North Carolina. You probably know some folks or have seen some honey that you're pretty sure is not legit on the store shelves, and that's a global problem, and we believe we can help address that and with bee data because as you know, as we just went through this whole presentation, if you know where the hive was located, when it was there, its strength, you have a pretty good understanding of how much honey that hive could produce. And so again, you have some data that will verify if I'm making a claim of sourwood honey, which I want to do, and I do, then I have some data that backs that up that says this honey was made at this location at this time. I had this many hives, and so I have some evidence to support my claims. And for all of us, when you're selling honey at a farmer's market or to your neighbor, you know, you have these conversations. How do you know this is what it is? And so this data, this information that you have as a beekeeper is the best evidence there is for the authenticity of the honey. And so we want to equip beekeepers with the tools to tell that story. And that includes all the way up through the supply chain, providing those tools for them. So we're really working hard in creating some technology platforms that give an assist for that.
Great. We appreciate that because I know that sometimes it's hard to justify the price, you know, when people are at the state fair and wanting to buy honey from all over North Carolina, and they're saying I can buy it in the grocery store for, you know, half that. Why is it so expensive? They don't get it.
Right. And I say go by the grocery store.
It's not nearly as good.
Don't bend on your price.
Well, again, I just want to I want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone. At one point, I think we were up to just shy of 100 participants. It's dropped down a little as the evening has progressed, but thanks to everyone. This is you know, this has been a learning experience for all of us. The officers, the club officers, we've been back and forth. We've been doing conference calls. We've done a couple test Zoom, you know, ourselves to learn how to come up to speed. So we hope that our May meeting we can exceed numbers, and we can get a little bit better on our participants. But thank you again, and hang in there. Hopefully we're getting the curve is getting flattened, and we hope that everyone stays safe and you know, enjoy your bees while you're stuck at home.
It's spring and the honey's flowing, so
there you go. All right, I'm going to sign off. If, does anyone have any final remarks? Okay, and one last shout out to Jen for letting us use their Zoom tonight. So night, everyone.